Nobody told me to order, should I? Because we haven't been ordering.
Senator, we are going to start now.
All right, okay, I will go and get some. Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. This morning we are going to be examining the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2019. My name is Boindra Dat Tiwari. I'm the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and I have with me three other members of the committee who are present. The four of us well engaged this morning, the Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago and her team. The purpose of this virtual meeting, and this is a virtual meeting of the Public Accounts Committee, is to examine the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2019. Based on the issues identified, the following key stakeholders have been invited: the Auditor General's Department, and the Auditor General is here with her team, and I will have them introduce themselves, as I will have members of the Public Accounts Committee introduce themselves. And we also have the Comptroller of Accounts from the Treasury Division, Ministry of Finance. This virtual meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and on Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, Parl View. Viewers and listeners can still send their comments related to today's topic via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, parl101@ttparliament.org. You can reach us at facebook.com/ttparliament, and of course by Twitter at ttparliament. Now, all I will ask of my colleagues today, both on the questioning side and on the responses to the questioning side, is to keep your microphones muted until it is your turn to speak. And generally, I would recognize you, and you will then have the opportunity to speak. But it will make the matters flow a lot easier if we can do that. What I want to do now is to ask members of the Auditor General's Department, starting with the Auditor General, to introduce themselves, and members of the Treasury Division, Ministry of Finance, to introduce themselves thereafter. Would you do that, please?
Hello, good morning. I am Lordy Pujadas, Auditor General.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon T. Ramdas, Chief Auditor General.
You are on mute. You are muted.
Okay, good morning all. Gary Peters, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning all. Neela Dwarka Ali, Audit Director.
Go ahead.
Chair, we've all introduced ourselves from the Auditor General side.
And the Comptroller of Accounts and her team?
morning. I'm Catherine Laban, Controller of Accounts.
Okay. Do you have anyone with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Will introduce themselves.
Good morning. Joycelyn Vial-Musa, Deputy Controller of Accounts.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nalisha Bali, Treasury Director, Treasury Division.
Okay, good morning to all of you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, Avenel Brown, Acting Treasury Director, Treasury Management Branch.
Okay. Anybody else from the Comptroller's Accounts Department?
No.
That's it? Okay. What I will then do is I will ask my own members of the PAC if they would also introduce themselves at this point. And I would ask the Auditor General and the Controller of Accounts to be prepared to give a short statement after the introductions by members of the committee.
Good morning, all. Taharko Bika, Vice Chair.
Good morning, Sharif Prasad, Member.
Good morning, Adrian Leons, Member.
Okay, and I introduced myself before, Bhoindranath Tiwari, Chairman, Public Accounts Committee. So I will ask the Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago if she will begin by giving a brief statement, an overview, and this will be followed by a statement from the Comptroller of Accounts.
Morning again. Thank you, Chair. The Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago has, under these very trying times with regard to COVID and the restrictions and the stay-at-home order, continued, and with the help of the staff, and at this point, I would really want to congratulate my staff for working so hard to make sure that this report of the Auditor General was completed on time and submitted in accordance with the statutory requirements. This year, we focused a lot on expenditure, compliance, internal controls, and compliance with financial directives and instructions, and whether or not the internal controls that provide or oversee or overarch the financial structure was being complied with. The purpose of that was to give us an assurance that the financial statements submitted, the appropriation accounts, the public statement, the public debt statement, etc., treasury statements, etc., that we have the requisite assurance that the statements represent a fairly true and fair representation of transactions that took place this year. This is my brief statement, and I will lead out to Ms. Laban, Controller of Accounts at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Auditor General.
Good morning again, Chair. I'd just like to say that I'm glad to be here to provide clarification and to help you gain a better understanding of the public accounts and of its content.
All right. Short and succinct. Okay. So we go into the questions now, and I will rotate the questions. I will start by asking some general questions as chair, and then we'll rotate. Other members will ask questions. Generally, a member will have an opportunity to ask a few questions. And we will keep rotating until we are satisfied that we have, by and large, exhausted the most important issues that we want to query based on the Auditor General's report of 2019. Now, the Auditor General, when you started by talking about the fact that you were able to do this report on time and within the specifications required of you, notwithstanding COVID. Can I ask a question? How did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the scope of works of the Auditor General's department? This is for the Auditor General.
Good morning again, and thank you, Chair, for the question. In terms of the interim work, which we do early in the year, it didn't really affect the scope. However, with regard to the verification of the substantive testing of the appropriation and accounts and the statements, we did have some challenges in completing our designated program of work. However, what we sought to do because of the lockdown was to reduce our sample size and also to minimize exposure. Staff were asked to enter into the requisite clients' places, obtain the necessary documentation that they could have gotten by way of soft copy or by way of photocopying, notifying the entity that we have in fact looked at the source documents, and they were then asked to work from home in terms of analyzing the data that they have received. Obviously, you know, that the sample size had to be reduced because, you know, you cannot take all of the client's source documentation, photocopy all of their documentation, etc. But we try to look at key areas and focus on key areas in terms of that reduction of our sample size. Thank you.
What percentage of the audit scope you'd say was curtailed? Auditor General? Did you hear my question?
No, sir, I did not.
What percentage of the audit scope was curtailed, you would say?
I think from a substantive testing point of view, we would say about 20 to 30%.
Okay. So, all right, so that's a good deal though. Would you say that that curtailment of 20 to 30% affected in any way your ability to reach informed conclusions based on the very thorough investigations that you normally do as the Auditor General?
I would say because we did some significant work during the interim phase, we were able to get the level of assurance that we needed to help add to our conclusions reached at the end of the substantive phase.
Even though the sample size was reduced, you don't think the accuracy of your assessment was altered in any way? I'm losing you. I'm losing your sound.
Okay, and because we did the interim work, we were able to get the level of assurance that we needed. So even though we had to reduce the sample size, we still had a significant high level of assurance that what was being produced by the client could be reasonably relied upon.
Okay. Did the COVID experience perhaps alert you more forcefully than it might have before of the need for a business continuity plan for the Auditor General's department? And if so, how are you going to deal with that now?
You were a little unclear, but I'm gathering from your question, you're asking about the COVID experience and business continuity plans across the board.
No, for you.
Or you're speaking from the Auditor General's perspective?
Yes.
Yes, this has certainly alerted us that there's a need for us to retool our methodologies and improve on our technical technologies and the way we are doing our work at present. And in fact, we are having discussions in terms of moving towards using Teams, meeting our clients via the Teams modem, We are also looking at how we can improve our own software, how we can improve our own file storage, our data storage, our data retrieval. These are sort of things that we have to look at as well as our clients, because it has certainly brought out to us that, the need. For example, we were able to do our audit work because we had a particular software where we were able to access via our server our files that were stored on the server. We were able to do that with a restricted number of personnel. There's need, therefore, to improve upon that so that a greater capacity of our staff would be able to utilize that particular facility and be able thus to interrogate data at a higher level as well.
Of course, business continuity and your ability to do your work also depends on the extent to which other institutions are able to have their own business continuity plan. Not so, and that is an important part of the report, which I will get to later.
Agreed.
Okay. Did the Auditor General's Department make representation to the Ministry of Health regarding the possibility of being included among the essential services stated in the public health regulations, because you were not included as essential services?
Not included, and no, we did not make representation to the Ministry of Health.
Okay, do you think that, in the context, do you think that that was an oversight, not on your part, but from the Ministry of Health not including you as essential services?
Yes, sir.
Because, everybody knows April 30th is the day for completion in the entire governmental system for the Auditor General Department, right? So that might have been an error or something overlooked by the ministry.
It was possibly overlooked, sir.
Yes. Okay, I will stop at this point and I'll pass on to my colleagues. Who's first? Who would like to speak? I have some questions for the Comptroller of Accounts, but I'll leave that for after my colleagues ask.
I can go if you have.
Yes, okay, fine.
Ms. Pujadas, I was wondering, with respect to revenue, the revenue for 2019, are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Okay. The revenue for 2019 was 2.521 billion, and that increased by 179% over 2018. Can you give me an idea of what caused the great increase in revenue?
Wasn't quite hearing you.
Okay. Are you hearing me now? Okay. What caused the increase in revenue collection of 179%, so that revenue for 2019 reached $2.521 billion? This is in comparison to 2018.
I am not quite clear where you're getting that figure. Could you give me the paragraph reference in which you...
This is a production sharing contract on page 29.
Oh no, that is not it. Okay. Excuse me, this production sharing contract is part of the note that is accompanying the consolidated statements and assets and liabilities. And I believe that you should direct that question to the Controller of Accounts, because they are the ones who prepare the accounts. We are just the auditors of the accounts.
Okay, well, can the Controller of Accounts deal with it?
Is it that you are asking what caused the what you call
the increase?
The 2.5 billion?
Yes, over 2018. The
I
increase, sorry?
Yeah. Now, this would be within the remit of the Ministry of Energy. I can get the information to you on that.
Sorry?
I think she's answering that the reason for the increase was increased revenue from the Ministry of Energy.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that she will provide that information.
Okay.
I think it had to do with the increase in the production of gas and also the price at the time.
Okay, all right. The other thing I'm interested to find out, one of the things on fleet management, this is on page 42 of your report. This concerns the fact that NP is the preferred supplier or the approved supplier, but it seems that Unipet was used to purchase fuel instead of NP, and there was no formal agreement for the change in supplier. Were the fleet cards used for purchasing the fuel? And what was the basis of the authorization to change supplier? This is under vehicle control on page 42.
Okay, Ms. Pujadas, we're not hearing you, huh? Auditor General, we're not hearing you.
Me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you're on now.
Okay. Could you repeat the question again, please?
On page 42, you deal with vehicle control and the cost of fuel and lubricants. And in the report, we see that NP is the approved supplier of such items. But the Fire Services Ministry of National Security purchased fuel from Unipet to the tune of $541,000. I'm asking, was the fuel cards used to purchase the fuel? And two, what was the basis of authorization for such a change of supplier?
I think in the context of what we were raising was the control differences, right? So the issue we were raising and we focused on is that the authorized person to deal with it was the NP. So we are indicating that we have found a control breach in terms of the directives, because we were looking at the control features and the breaches in the control features. In terms of whether the fleet cards were used to purchase, this we cannot say. The question would have to be raised directly with the Ministry of National Security Fire Services.
But on what basis did the ministry change supplier? Was there an agreement? Because you say that did you see documentation to approve the change in supplier?
No, we did not. We did not see documentation, and this is the reason why it is a material difference that we have noted, and this is why it's being brought to account here in our report. And these things would have been written to the entity at exit meetings and by way of management letters. Responses to these things have yet to be received from them as to why this course of action or these courses of actions were undertaken.
And could we get the answer from you when you receive it? Because I think this is a breach, and we need to know, well, on what basis would people just change suppliers? And is there a contract? Did the permanent secretary approve it? I would be very interested to hear the response from the relevant people.
Certainly, we can certainly follow up with the Ministry of National Security Fire Services with your queries, but we would just want to add that we certainly did not see a contract. And again, this is one of the reasons why we have brought this to the attention of the Public Accounts Committee by way of this report. But we will certainly follow up in terms of our management letter response and add to that response the queries that you have raised today.
Okay. Dr. Tiwari, can I ask one more question in this round?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, please proceed while you're on the floor.
On page 45, Carifesta 2019, I noted in your report, you said expenditure was 28 million. Bills on hand of 12 million was in excess of the allocation. I'm curious to find out, did you see approvals for the increase in expenditure of the $12 million? And were you satisfied with the explanations you received for the budget, for the expenses to exceed the budget?
But the budget was 43 million.
Yes. And in the report, it says there was an excess of the allocation.
Yes, the budget was 43 million, but then in the annual budget, annually, 28 million was allocated to Carifesta. And on top of that, they added, they had bills on hand when we checked of 12. So for the annual year of 2018-2019, for that particular year, it was an excess of 12.
Okay. And were you provided with satisfactory explanations as to why?
We haven't received the responses yet from the ministries. In terms of because remember, a lot of the ministries are now returning to work. And so therefore, a lot of them will now have to go through the letters that we've sent and will now have to respond to us formally.
Okay, again, could we get some information on that when you receive it?
Certainly.
Okay, my final question deals with contracts. On page 48 and 49, it seems based on what you have said that there were contracts issued for which there was no approval. And I'm curious to find out what were the reasons for contracts being issued or for expenditure of 25 million by the Ministry of Agriculture, Education, National Security, Community Development, the Police Service. They did not provide you with formal contracts for expenditure. And how did this affect the conduct of your audit?
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. In the context of internal controls and overall framework and financial directives, one of the standard requirements for all ministries and departments in pursuing to do expenditure is that they follow particular courses of action. For certain services, they are supposed to have contractual agreements and the terms and conditions which must be defined. So from our perspective as the auditor, we would be looking to see that the ministries have been in compliance with this. Now, we cannot say overall, but because remember that we are looking at a sample. So what the report has reported is that based on the sample, we found instances where we were not able to verify documentary evidence, that contracts to support the particular service existed. Again, the ministry has to respond to our query, but because we would have written the ministry on this matter, and the ministry would have to formally respond to our query.
Yes, because I think this is something that requires explanation, because I would like to know how payments could be made without contracts. Who approved them? Were they approved by the PS? And if not, if contracts were awarded, did they go through the correct process for the award of contracts? So again, I'm asking if we could be provided with information when you receive it.
Ma'am, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
so there have been requests for information. Please take note of it, and the secretariat here will write to you to confirm what the information that we require is. Who's next? Is it you, Senator Tahago?
Yes, Chair. I have a few questions, and I want to start with well, I guess it may be the Auditor General, it may be the Comptroller of Accounts. When you go to the Auditor General's report, and we go to page 128, you see that the size of the funds is just short of $28 billion. If you use 28 billion as a figure in terms of the funds that the government has at its disposal, but when you go to page 117, you see that the exchequer account, the overdrawn balance as at balance sheet date, September 30th, 2019, was $41.4 billion. So you have a disparity of 10 plus 3. So you have a disparity of $13.4 billion. Based on the amendments to the law that allows for an overdraft facility, by my correct recollection, is 20% of expected revenue. So even if you were to take the expenditure figure of $53 billion, 20% of that would be significantly short of 13 billion, at least by a couple $1 billion. Given that is the law, how do you reconcile an overdrawn exchequer account of $41.4 billion when the funds that the state has on page 128 only stand at 28 billion? So that's the question I have. Has there been an infringement of the law?
I think you're looking at this, if you look at their statement of assets and liability, their consolidated statement of assets and liabilities, which is in the volume 1, you will see that in terms of presenting a financial statement, the overdraft is represented as a current liability of 41 million. In what I think you're addressing, or billion, what you're addressing is a question, I think, as to whether or not the sustainability of the government to continue to maintain an exchequer deficit overdraft. That is not something that I could possibly answer for you, but I know under section 46 of the central bank regulations, central bank is allowed to give the government, as you rightly stated, 20% of estimated revenue as an overdraft facility. It's an overdraft facility on the exchequer account because the exchequer account, like a normal bank account, comes like if you had a personal bank account and a personal checking account, a bank can give you an option of providing you with an overdraft facility. And I think that is what that particular matter is. It is a facility that is provided to the country so that transactions can continue to function. But I am not the best person to speak on that because I am not the accounting officer. I am the Auditor General on that matter. So I don't know if Ms. Laban or any of her team would like to add further to what I have indicated here.
Comptroller, would you like to say something on this? Would you be in a position to say something on this?
I just wanted to ask, is it that Senator is asking whether we are in breach of the central bank overdraft?
I'm not hearing, Mr. Ban.
Is it that you are saying that we have overdrawn our balance at the central bank, our overdraft?
Yeah, so the question is, given the formula for calculation, whatever is the disparity between the exchequer overdrawn balance and the size of the funds that the state has, that difference cannot exceed 20% of revenue. Notwithstanding that, given that the overdrawn balance is significantly above that when you account for the $28 billion in state funds, has there been an infringement of the law? Because that is the law that guides the use of the exchequer account.
But I would say no, because the figures in our books is a bit different from that as presented by central banks due to timing differences, mainly in the unpresented checks. And those are the checks that central bank would have recorded as encashed, and those that we would have recorded as presented in the system. So there would always be a timing difference, which would make our balance appear larger than the actual overdraft at the central bank. So according to the central bank's figure at the end of September 2019, we were not in excess of the overdraft of 20% limits.
I've got most of what you said, and that basically you're saying that you operate with different books of accounts. But then, for the purposes of this committee, I believe it shouldn't be difficult to ask for the comptroller to provide us with a similar balance sheet date information so that we can determine, we can rest assured that in fact there was no increase above the legal limit when you consider the exchequer account and the overdrawn balance in the exchequer account, which is 41.3 billion on this book. So whatever would have been the balance on your book at balance sheet date, vis-a-vis the funds that the state has as well in the account, so that we can rest assured at the level of the committee that in fact there was no infringement of the law, at least from the books of the Ministry of Finance.
Okay. Yes, we will provide that information to you.
All right. Okay. So this is something we will request and you'll ask. Senator Tahaka, given the nature of your question and the answer from the Comptroller of Accounts, I think it might also be necessary to write to the Governor of the Central Bank on this matter, and also to get the information in such a way as we can reconcile what the Comptroller of Accounts is saying with what the Governor of the Central Bank might say. And that might also give us an idea of what is the revenue sum that on which the central bank bases its 20%, because I suspect all those things are involved in the calculation of that figure. If that is okay with you, Senator Tahaka, we will also write to the central bank. We'll have the Secretariat ask the Governor of the Central Bank to respond as well.
Yes, Chair. In fact, I can recall someone from the Ministry of Finance in a prior year stating that the issue with the revenue had to do with the base year date, that is the reference year that is used.
Yes.
But we want to ensure that that is consistent with the legislation. So if they reduce that response that was verbal at that time in writing, then we can become more comfortable with the method of calculation.
Yes, and at least you would know what figure from what year is being used to base their calculation.
Definitely.
I agree with you. Okay, proceed. You have more questions?
Yeah, so let me just ask a couple softer questions. So on page 49, the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, a ministry that I'm very course, with given my involvement in culture, I'm seeing that section 2.47, there was some issue regarding non-provision of information for audit examination, some $477,713.56. Can we get any? Has there been any clarification on that since? I guess this will be for the Auditor General.
This again has to deal with a similar question that Senator C. Prasad raised in regard to the Ministry of Agriculture. Again, we were looking at whether or not contracts existed for certain goods and services. We were not provided with these particular contracts to the tune of 477. Formal response, again, as repeated earlier, as indicated earlier, have not been received from the ministries with regard to why or whether or not contracts do exist. However, we had asked for it, and at the time of our departure from the entity, we did not receive it. And so again, we know that as one of the control features, an internal control feature to ensure that the goods and services that is being provided is according to the terms of the contract and according to the specification, we would have needed to see that to substantiate the expenditure being spent. And we were not provided with that particular level of evidence, documentary evidence.
So I'll hold my other questions for the next round.
All right. MP Leons?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask some questions with respect to the CAPE scholarship. On page 112, they spoke about the number of scholars that did not fulfill their obligatory service and have monies due to the state, and actually to such a long time that it might actually become statute barred. In your report, you said the Ministry of Education should ensure that procedures are followed to avoid scholars' debts becoming statute barred. My question is, what are some of the measures that the Ministry of Education could implement based on what you would have investigated to streamline the processes to avoid time lapse in efforts to recover sums owed?
I think, one of the key functions that why these things happen is that a proper system of creating a proper database of these scholars that you have, where they are, and the course contents that they are pursuing, and the timeframes in which they're pursuing, needs to be established. Such a database should also have particular flag points in it, which would alert the ministry as to whether or not this scholar is coming close to completing, or even such flag points, because this is something we've also discovered, that some students may not be actually be making the grade and actually should not be getting any further funding. And so the ministry needs, by way of getting the reports from the schools, from as to their status and these sorts of things, need to be configured in such a way as we are moving into the technology world, that needs to be done so that point flags could be made throughout that would alert the particular officer that is reviewing these things that something is not awry, or that they need to get in touch with the particular student so that this situation would not become statute barred. Because as long as there's communication on either side, the statute barred limitation will not come into effect. So monitoring and proper procedures established for monitoring is the key.
Okay, so you're suggesting that a review of their monitoring policy be done to mitigate against this?
Yes, we are suggesting that, but they do have a particular policy in place. So not only a review to assess the gaps, but there's also a situation of implementing the policy and ensuring that the policy has been implemented.
Okay. You also spoke about, with respect to funding, on page 107 of your report, that the Ministry of Finance should revisit the payment cycle for CAPE scholarships. What do you see as the key challenges to implementing the recommended changes, and how practicable would these changes be?
This is a very, very good question. The problem, of course, is the financial year starts October 1st. And so does many of the schools and scholarship persons also start on October 1st. And so there's always a challenge for the students to obtain the necessary funding in a timely manner. I would say that obviously there would always be a timing difference. So it is a dialogue and a discussion that perhaps will need to take place between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Education as to when perhaps scholarships are actually dispersed, and whether or not the students can start in the first term or the second term, or there's a delayed process in starting. But it's a dialogue that needs to take place between them as to a best fit, because we did see when we have examined certain number of files that a number of students did have some challenges in terms of the timing that the funding was received.
Is it that you're suggesting maybe that they don't go that year and they go the following year or something like that?
I would not want to make a pronouncement or a suggestion because, I am not necessarily an expert in terms of how an education program should be administered or a scholarship program. But we did find that there was gaps in terms of the funding and when the students were receiving the funding, and it did have an impact on some of the students. Again, I would say that, it's a conversation. And it's a conversation that needs to take place at a policy level and at a policy decision-making level as to what is the best fit. But I would not want to intervene on a policy level.
Okay. Last question, and we'll come back in the next rounds. You spoke about, on page 102 of your report, you spoke about several limitations that hindered the progress of the audit. So I know based on your audit, you would have given some information. How severe was the effect of these limitations in terms of you achieving your audit objective? You spoke about files being stored off-site and water damage and physical.
Well, I think that impacted in terms of being able to assess, in terms of being able to assess how many students are actually owing to the state. What status are we at right now with students in terms of how many of them have not returned to provide the service? How many of them have not followed through on their obligations according to the terms of the scholarships? Because as indicated in the report from the sample, we were looking to address those type of things and get an understanding of those things. But the files, unfortunately, were waterlogged or damaged, so we were not able to really analyze those files.
So based on just your opinion, you in your report there's about 14 million that is at risk with respect to students owing to the state. Is it that based on the trends you suspect that it could be twice as much, or what is your anticipation based on the information that you were not able to retrieve?
I think I would want to stick to what we know, and rather than to project in terms of what is a projection, because I'm not knowing the full volume. I would not want to expand or extrapolate. I cannot scientifically say. I would also want to add that the ministry themselves have acknowledged that there are certain things that they need to improve upon. And I think they have indicated, and we've sought to put that into the report as well, that they are making attempts to move towards providing a database and updating their current database, which they stopped using, and getting the information to the point where they would have more accurate information and improvement in terms of their monitoring systems as well.
That's good. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, MP Leons. Auditor General, I'd like to take you to page 43 of the Auditor General's report to item 2.20, extraordinary expenditure. And I'll just read quickly from it, it's short. The detailed estimates of recurrent expenditure identifies extraordinary expenditure as unforeseen expenditure that is not likely to recur. However, the sample selected for examination showed monthly payments amounting to $431,916.25 to 3 contractors for janitorial services and rental of vehicles which were charged against the extraordinary expenditure vote. It was also noted that several unpaid invoices relating to previous years for monthly janitorial services and vehicle rentals to the same service providers were also charged against the extraordinary expenditure vote. So what this says is that the extraordinary expenditure vote did not satisfy the requirement for unforeseen expenditure, but was in fact used for recurrent increased expenditure that were not planned for, and they involved the same contractors over several years. Would you like to make a comment on that, Auditor General? I mean, I find this kind of extraordinary, if you ask me.
Chair, this is a Ministry of National Security.
Yeah.
We did write to the Ministry of National Security, and we have also attempted to get a verbal response. I think, from what I understand, this is an item, because they do not have a specific item for a specific type of policing activity. Over the years, it has been an accepted practice. This is what has been intimated to me for the use of this particular item of expenditure. However, I have advocated to them that if it's so, again, they should seek to have a dialogue with the Ministry of Finance Budget Division, perhaps with establishing a specific item number for this particular type of policing activity that is undertaken. This is all I would like to say at this point in time.
Would you say that, given your approach in this particular 2019 audit, where you said that your focus was on expenditure, on compliance, and on internal controls, that this represents an instance in which, in the Ministry of National Security, all 3 have been violated?
I would say that they have not utilized the item number in accordance with what the estimates of expenditure has identified it for. And of course, in terms of a control framework, of course, they should have been in compliance with that. However, I am not saying that they did not have the requisite supporting documentation to support the expenditure, which would be a very material control breakdown.
Okay, I could follow up with 5 or 6 questions, but I won't at this point because we're dealing here with, I will just leave that for now. I have a question for the Comptroller of Accounts, so I will shift at this point to her. On page 16 of the report, Ms. Laban, in your particular report, you have a conclusion. Again, I will read the whole conclusion because it's short. And based on the information that you provide, this is what you say. The issue of the public debt and debt sustainability has long been a concern for policymakers of both fiscal and monetary policy. The central government debt and contingent liability must be examined and analyzed in its entirety to ensure present and future debt sustainability. It is important for overall macroeconomic policy to manage the debt, and it needs to be coordinated closely with fiscal, monetary, and other macroeconomic and financial policies. For this reason, debt managers and monetary policies, given the independence among the policy instruments. Sorry, I think I skipped a line. For this reason, debt managers and fiscal and monetary authorities should share an understanding of the objectives of debt, fiscal, and monetary policies, given the independence among policy instruments. And this last line is critical, this last sentence. Close coordination is needed to choose an appropriate mix of financing and policy adjustment to facilitate economic recovery while preventing the buildup of an unsustainable debt burden. Could you, Comptroller of Accounts, share with the general public what was your burning concern or worry which led you to write that short and succinct but very pointed conclusion?
Just to summarize, really, what was intended is to really to emphasize the fact that the 3 independent bodies should continue and increase their coordination amongst themselves to ensure the most appropriate mix of financing and policy adjustment. So it was really to emphasize that fact.
Okay, do you sense a certain amount of dissonance or perhaps not enough synchronization now?
Possibly, I'm saying that because we have always advocated this over the years, and it could always improve. The coordination can always be improved.
Okay, and this is the link between policy formulation, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and debt management. Is that correct? Is that what you're concerned about?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to ask one more question before I go on to my colleagues. And I had it here just now. I don't know what I did with it. It really has to do with the issue, and I'll ask this to both the Comptroller of Accounts and the Auditor General. As you know, the government has come to Parliament recently and had requested a drawdown on the HSF in respect of COVID of $1.5 billion. And in the last budget review, the Minister of Finance mentioned that he had drawn down $400 million. all of this related COVID. And following up on this loan issue that you raised, the Parliament gave approval for borrowing up to $10 billion more from the Development Fund. And the Minister of Finance indicated that he had borrowed about $1 billion out of the $10 billion so far. Both of them under the amount that they are actually allowed by Parliament. I wanted to ask, at what point does the Comptroller of Accounts become involved in this? Is it only after the expenditure and the reportage of the expenditure in both cases for the development loan and the HSF? Or is this monitored as monies are drawn down, for instance? Could you give me a little insight into how that is done?
We really at the end point.
At the end point?
Yes, we really at the end.
When it is reported?
Yeah, when it's reported.
You can only act on the report.
Yes. And when it is drawn down, we bring it to account in our books. When the Heritage and Stabilization Fund is drawn down, we would have to account for it and bring it to account in the books. We consolidate it.
But your only role is recording the information.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Might I go now to the Auditor General and ask her a question as to how these matters, such matters are dealt with in the Auditor General's report? Because I imagine she would pick up this information on the basis of your report. Is that correct? Am I correct, Comptroller?
Yes, we audit the statements. So, for example, if a loan is taken out, it would be formed the basis of the statement of the public debt, and it would be included in the statement of the public debt. So in looking at that, in our sample, we would oftentimes look at the new loans that are taken up and look at the conditions of those new loans, the guarantees. We look at the information that is presented in the public debt and match that to the records of the Treasury to ensure that the information is correct and that everything has been reconciled. That is as it relates to the statement of the public debt. The Heritage and the Stabilization Fund by statute is a legal entity in itself and therefore is required to produce financial statements in its own right.
Yes. But does that come under your scrutiny? Or is it under the scrutiny of the central bank and you then look at the central bank accounts?
We would look at like for example, we are the auditors of both the central bank and HSF.
Yes.
So for example, now this would be a material activity that has taken place this year. So in terms of our risk profile and looking at the HSF accounts, which have to be presented by November of this year, we would look at the drawdowns and the procedures to ensure compliance with the legislative requirements have been complied with. Excuse me.
Yes.
Right. So that would take place when we are reviewing the accounts of the HSF.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other colleagues, you are now free to ask questions, please. Who is Senator C. Prasad? Would you like to ask questions?
Thank you. I'm looking at page 48 and 49 of, sorry, not 58, my apologies, of the report concerning the audit of revenue. And in particular, I'm looking at Customs and Excise, Ministry of Finance, when there's a difference of 393,000 between the total receipts as per the Statement of Receipts and Disbursements and the electronic cash book. And we note that these are some of their timing differences, and that's what we were told in May last year, that this was because there were timing differences between for the controller of accounts to process treasury cards. And I was wondering what the controller is doing to ensure that the delays are not are shortened, so that you would not have these challenges in the future.
Yes. Well, right now we are still largely manual. So with the advent of the IFMIS, that with the computerized system, at least we would be getting information on an online real-time basis, and it would reduce a lot of the variances in the adjustment.
Pardon me, you are breaking up, so I wasn't hearing you clearly. Could you just say that again, please?
No, is it that you were asking about the differences in the electronic cash book?
Yes, because of the delay in processing the treasury cards.
Right, but what would help? What I was saying is right now we are looking at the Integrated Financial Management Information System, and that would greatly help because that would give us real-time online information, and it would reduce the delays in the adjustments. It would reduce the adjustments actually, because there wouldn't be any long delays in producing the treasury card.
So that will eliminate this issue.
Yes, it should.
Okay. The other thing I was looking at was the cash deposits, and this is on page 59 and 60, where we realized that funds are not being deposited on a timely basis. And I was wondering what measures are being put in place because what we found is that the cash is not stored in a fireproof vault. And I'm referring specifically Ministry of Health, Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs, and not deposited on a daily basis. And I'm wondering what recommendations would the Auditor General have to prevent these things from happening? Because I mean, these are fairly straightforward things that is normal financial practices. You store cash overnight in a fireproof vault, and you deposit cash on a daily basis.
You are directing this question to the Auditor General, but the Auditor General, again, I would like to repeat, is the auditor under Section 116(2) of the Constitution. The control mechanisms that deals with the control framework is normally addressed through Treasury directives, and it's under the financial management scrutiny of the Ministry of Finance. The questions as to whether or not what improvements can be made should be addressed to the Ministry of Finance.
Forgive me, but you as the auditor wouldn't have a role in making recommendations to deal with these issues?
Our role is to ensure that the accounts is prepared in accordance with the directives, financial directives, in accordance with the regulations. Our mandate is defined for us in the Section 116(2). That is a review of the accounts. Now, obviously, when we report these matters in terms of the timely delays and stuff, we would expect that those persons involved in the administration of the financial and in those persons who are involved in maintaining the control framework of the finances would take note of these things and therefore would seek to address it. However, the regulations in itself requires daily submissions, daily deposits. So therefore, the ministry under would have a right to ensure that their deposits, their cash deposits, is being done at the outstations and being deposited on a daily basis. So that again comes back to the question of monitoring and ensuring that monitoring is being adhered to and being followed up. So this is the ministry has to take action, the Ministry of Finance has to take action, and then we will go back and look to see that such action is being taken.
Okay. My other question concerns non-performing loans. This is on page 123 of your report. The Port Authority, their loans increased by 56% in 2018, and then again in 2019 by 66%. Did you get an explanation as to why there was such an increase?
No, we did not.
And what actions and so on is what follow up, I should say, are you doing on this? Because I mean, there must be some reason for the increase, and somebody must have approved it.
Directing this question to the Auditor General or to the Controller of Accounts?
I thought it was the Auditor General because this came out of your.
Well, this is an extract of what would have been in volume 1 of the Controller of Accounts statement. This is a representation of what they have stated in their report. So we were just highlighting the fact that they have drawn reference that there are several loans which represents 96%. So this is in volume 1 of the Treasury Statements report.
Okay, well then who can give me the explanation as to why there was an increase? I have no idea. I mean, is it the Control of Accounts?
Could I ask the Controller of Accounts if she would like to make an input here?
Yes, I wouldn't have that information on hand, why there was an increase, but I can get that information to you.
Okay. Great, thank you very much. Chairman, I would come back on, if there's another round, I'll come back. I'll give the other.
Okay, I will strive for closure at about 12:30. And I will go on now to Senator Tahaka. Are you ready with questions?
Yes, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my first question arises from the non-performing loan section on page 123, which flows into 124 of the Auditor General's report. And it's really there are two items of concern there. The first item has to do with the National Energy Skills Center having a non-performing loan, so an outstanding balance, or being delinquent, whichever would be the appropriate term, the tune of 50.9, so effectively $51 million. And I would want to know if there was any explanation offered for such delinquency.
With respect to all of these non-performing loans, because they haven't been paying on these loans, a write-off is being sought from Cabinet to have them written off. But they have been in the books for quite a long time.
Okay. And so then, okay, so then when we look to the governments in the Caribbean, all right, in fact, there are substantial loans to our neighbors, who of course we care for their welfare. But when you are in long-term loan agreements and the loans are not being serviced, what exactly what exactly is the recourse of the state regarding these things? Is it that for the governments of the Caribbean, there is an effective write-off, or there are other avenues for recourse?
I can't say whether there are other avenues, but right now we are looking at a write-off because of the length of time that these have been outstanding.
Okay, Chair, I'll stop there because I was really hoping that there would have been some notes to assist us in those 2 points.
Okay, well, you can always come back if you have 5 minutes or so. MP Leons, you have some follow-ups?
Yeah, just a general question, actually. Throughout the report, there were some deficiencies in terms of like ministries not having the formal contracts, the provision for contracts. We also have some deficiencies with current transfers and subsidies. I'm just wondering, and some deficiencies actually in terms of some of the reportings of the internal auditors within the different spheres. I'm wondering if you think this is due to maybe a lack of training or a lack of possibly communication in terms of what is required, and if some form of training, probably headed by your office, the Auditor General's office, throughout the ministries, could mitigate against some of these deficiencies.
Throughout my tenure in this department, documentation, retrieval of documentation, storage of documentation, monitoring by the internal audit, these have been issues that have been flagged by successive Auditor Generals in successive Auditor Generals reports. What we have come to understand, training is an aspect, but it is also a question of staff rotation. The accounting units, by and large, staff move in, staff move out. So you do have a dedicated core of staff, like at the more senior levels, the Director of Finance, accounting executives, 1s and 2s, which would have the requisite experience, but they are not throughout the public service. Many of the larger ministries would have these particular positions on their establishment. Other than that, you would have staff that are clerical staff really functioning in these accounting positions, and then they may get a promotion or they may get acting in a higher position in outside of the accounting units. So that also has an impact on the way the work is performed. But I think I am harping, and I think you can see from the report that monitoring is a key to ensuring that the controls, which have been established by the financial regulations, are being adhered to and being complied with.
Well, I understand the employee attrition being a major issue, and from what I'm getting from you, monitoring and implementation of the monitoring is key in terms of being effective. Is it that there are different standards throughout different ministries, or everybody doing their own thing in a different way, and can that be standardized? I'm just asking.
So the standard is the financial regulations, the financial instructions, and treasury directives. That is the standard that is supposed to be applied across the board.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why you will find in the report where it is reported, where it is not being in compliance with Treasury directives, Treasury guidelines, Treasury instructions, financial regulations, and the Exchequer and Audits Act ordinance.
Okay. I'm leaning back on training. I'm anticipating is definitely required for persons to be in compliance with the regulations. All right, thank you.
I think training is key, and to underpin that, training needs to be placed in a context, and therefore they need to understand. Okay, so if I don't do this, it's not to them, okay, so I have not signed the vote book properly, or I haven't, I've overlooked an authorized signature on the invoice order. Big deal, right? But they're not understanding the concepts behind it and the control features behind it. So I think in administering the training, they need to understand the context and the impact by not doing something, the potential risk that could occur for malfeasance or misappropriation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Chair.
All right, then. A couple of things, Auditor General. We did not, because of how the report was constructed on the basis of themes or issues that were considered important, we didn't have really departmental analysis of particular problems. You tended to take them thematically. So for instance, you dealt with the issue of ICT capacity and so on, which I will come to in a minute. But I want to ask, one of the problems we've had over the years in this particular committee, based on the reports that you have given, are the accounts of the House of Assembly. Can you indicate to the committee and the general public what is the situation with audited accounts for this particular entity?
At present, I'm looking on the accounts for the Assembly. I am assuming, Chair, that you are speaking of the Tobago House of Assembly.
Tobago House of Assembly, yes.
Right. The Tobago House of Assembly audit with respect to 2016 is at present ongoing. We are hoping to finalize that particular report shortly. We did have some challenges with the Tobago House of Assembly 2016 because one of the divisions of that ministry also had some challenges with their documents being where the documents were stored, and therefore the destruction of some of those documents. We have not received financial statements for 2017 or 2018. But we are committed to completing 2016 within this next 2 quarters here, so that the accounts could come before the committees, the relevant committee.
And all accounts have been audited up to 2015. Is that correct?
No, sir. In fact, we started with we stopped at 2010, and then we sought to bring it up to date, identifying that, okay, we will start with 15. So in the financial year of 2015, we attempted to do 2015 in a timely manner, so that the timeliness of the accounts would become relevant. So we succeeded with 2015, and we received 2016. And again, there were some challenges on both our parts, both the Assembly's part and our part in bringing that to completion. And then we have not received 17 and 18. I think the plan which the previous Auditor Generals had sought to do, and which I presume to continue doing, is that you will try to have one current and one concurrent, one from behind, being done simultaneously within the period, so that at least we can bring the Tobago House of Assembly's accounts up to date, and in the same time frame as the accounts of the Public Accounts Committee, September 30th deadlines.
So as it stands then, you have unaudited accounts for 2011, 12, 13, 14, and you also have 15, or was that completed?
No, 15 was completed.
Was completed. So you have 11, 12, 13, 14, and then you have 17 and 18.
Yeah.
Okay. The second issue which I wish to raise and which I did not see in the report are the issues of the procurement of the ships or ferry vessels based on a government-to-government arrangement between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Australia. Did that matter come under your scrutiny at all, or did you ask for information in relation to that? Because it's a big issue of procurement involving the lack of formalization of the new procurement legislation and the limbo situation of the Central Tenders Board. So I just wanted to ask if that matter came under your scrutiny or under your questioning at all.
At present, we are reviewing, it's a DP project and an infrastructure development project. And so we are reviewing that project, but it's a work in progress.
Okay, so are you saying then arrangements were made for this particular government-to-government transaction, which, as I understand it, involve private providers under the government-to-government arrangement? Are you saying that financial arrangements for these boats or ferries were done through the development program and the infrastructure development fund?
The national security boats were done through DP, some, and the ferries were done through infrastructure.
Okay. And are you aware at all of the procurement procedure that led to the payment of sums from these funds?
We are still reviewing the evidence. We have done our necessary field work. We are still reviewing the evidence. We have not completed the report yet. So as I indicated, it's a work in progress.
Can I ask when you might have such a report? Would it be done prior to the next Auditor General's report, or is it something that we will have to wait for in the next Auditor General's report?
It is not a special audit. It forms part of it is part of our program of work. So it would probably be included in the next Auditor General's report.
Is there any way of making that a matter of urgent priority?
Well, as we indicated before, it is a work in progress. Okay. And it is being, right, as we've indicated before, it is a work in progress.
All right. Have you been given the information that the Auditor General's department have requested over time in the pursuit of your mandate?
I'm not clear as to the direction of the question. Are you asking in the same context of the conversation that we are at present having, or is it in a wider context that you are speaking of?
No. I'm asking in this particular instance. You said that the Ministry of National Security is the development program for the boats, and then you said there's an infrastructure development payment as well, and you said that these matters are being investigated. In the investigation to make sure that you get the facts, has there been cooperation? I'm not hearing a sound.
We have not had any major challenges in terms of obtaining documentary evidence.
Okay, so it's only a question of getting all and doing the report.
Correct.
Okay. In in the Auditor General's report, you mentioned the fact that there was a biometric system established in 2014, I think, in the Ministry of Social Development, and that was abandoned in sometime later, perhaps 2016. Given that there is discussion now about a unique identifier system for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, would you be willing to say whether we, had missed some time in not allowing this biometric system to evolve? Because I noticed that there was a 5.9% inclusion, and at that point it was abandoned. Have we lost some time there? And I'm really using that leading up to some questions I want to ask on ICT capacity, on which you have an entire chapter in this document.
Chair, through you, can I ask my audit director responsible for IT audit to address that question?
Yes, I would very much appreciate that, and I'd be happy to get the response.
So I will now come to Mr. Warwick Ali.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General. Chair, I would answer yes, we would have lost some time because, as you would know, in terms of IT and a rapidly changing environment, we are kind of left behind on the biometric systems in terms of the social services, but certainly would have helped in enhancing service delivery.
So if we had continued with that, let's say by 2015, we would have achieved about 5%. We could have achieved more in 2016 and go on. It is possible that with time, let's say in 2 years, 3 years' time, we could have had every single person, certainly within the social development matrix. And I know that there are significant numbers of them, over 300,000. We could have certainly had all of them under the biometric card. Okay.
Certainly. The valid person, certainly.
Yes, and then the second thing is that the biometric card could have easily been, dovetailed into any unique identifier system.
Yes.
So it would have been a support system for a unique identifier for the nation as a whole. Yes. So would you say, and I'm not trying to make you say anything, I think you said it already, that we really missed an opportunity and lost some time with that system by not carrying it through. Is that true?
As I said before, yes, we did miss an opportunity.
Okay. Now, I read the ICT report, and I had a conversation with the Auditor General prior to this particular meeting, in order to clarify a few things. And at that time, I did say that I was tremendously satisfied with the special audit that was done with the IT system across the governmental system, which is from page 76 of this report up to, just one second, I just want to get it right. This went on until page 100. So this part of the report is actually 24 pages. And before I ask you any questions, I want to reiterate again that I thought that this particular report, the special audit report for information technology assessment, was very well done. I don't know how much you were affected by COVID, but I think in assessing the situation, trying to give the truth about what in fact had been achieved in terms of information technology capacity in certain places, so that you identify that significant amounts had been achieved in the Attorney General's office, in social development, etc. But you also identified, in my view, very, very honestly, the serious problems we had in IT, one with business continuity, which emerged and was, what can I say, signal in a very strong way when the COVID crisis emerged. Secondly, the silo effect of everybody doing their own business in IT throughout the ministries, sometimes with two ministries buying the same thing for the same purpose, and not talking to each other, and then 20 or 30 departments doing different things, not talking to each other, not having any continuity. And then the serious consequential effects of this, from having a governmental system and a public service system that could be properly digitized. Could you tell me a little bit about your findings? Tell me about the problems. You can tell me the good things. I have no problem with that if you say what has been achieved. But I also want you to tell me what are the hurdles that we must cross if we are to be a 21st century country in terms of digitization of the public service, and not be a backwards country in the 19th century.
Thank you, Chair. But I will say some of the good things first. In that, I must commend some of the ministries and departments in implementing some of the recommendations that we had made in the 2017-2018 report. Also, there has been some collaboration and integration, and those are recommendations that we made previously in terms of Ministry of Social Development, elections and boundaries, licensing and customs. So we have made some improvement. We have made some small steps, but when you're looking at an IT environment that is ever changing rapidly, we need quicker steps. Although it may be small step, but it has to be at a pace. Presently, we are not where we should be. And as you said, it came to the fore with the onset of the pandemic, where we realized that we were not ready in terms of digital government. In terms of the National ITC plan, two of the strategic thrusts would have been ease of doing business and enhance public service delivery. Now, if we have IT governance that is lacking across all ministries and departments, we would not be able to achieve those goals. In terms of those goals, what we need our proper infrastructure, we need a framework, we need policies, procedures, and these are things that were mentioned in the previous reports that are still outstanding. Ministry of Public Administration, they are responsible for ICT, and they have made some progress in terms of policies and procedures and implementing certain recommendations. Due to lack of good IT governance, this always and most times, it will lead to inefficiencies. It will lead to not getting value for money in IT investments. It will lead to not optimizing your information system. So these are things that we have to look at in the future. We also, as a country, need to look at emerging technologies. We have cloud computing. That would solve a lot of our problems in terms of where we talk about shared services, shared resources. Or of course, we have to look and weigh the risk in terms of all the information security risks.
Is there a cloud system for the public service now?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat it? I didn't hear.
Yeah, is there a cloud computing service? I mean, do you have a cloud that you operate under in the public service?
No, I'm not aware of that. I am aware that...
So a cloud does not exist. So
Not that
a first solution problem for storage of collective information of the Trinidad and Tobago public service system, and therefore a common basis on which the governmental system could talk to each other, is a cloud service to cover the entire system.
Well, firstly, if we have to speak about these systems, talking to each other, we need multiple interfaces. Currently, there are a number of systems that cannot speak to each other, so we need those interfaces. And of course, in terms of the cloud computing, storage is just one aspect that we would be able to aid in. But bear in mind, as I said, the information security risk, in terms of we have to make sure and classify our information in terms of unrestricted or restricted or sensitive. And it's only when we do that analysis, we will decide, okay, if we need a public cloud or if we need a private cloud, or further encryption controls and so.
Okay. All right, but I cut you by my intervention. I'm sorry. You were saying some other things. No.
In terms of emerging technology?
For instance, let me ask you a question. Let's say there was a general consensus in the country that we want to be a 21st century country, and therefore the unique identifier is a critical place to start, right? So we've missed the boat with the system in social development, but we could start with a unique identifier. Tell me, what are the problems we would have to solve in the existing system to make that unique identifier work as it should?
Okay, well, currently we have a unique identifier in terms of the PIN number that we use from our birth certificates that is generated from Auditor General. So that could be used as a unique identifier. However, in terms of where we spoke about having a central database of biodata, where all ministries would be able to access depending on their relevance, in terms of your name, date of birth, and so on. Election and Boundaries Commission would have been one entity that would have already verified those information. Once that is verified, any other entity that needs this information as a criteria to access grants or whatever, then it would be easy for them. They would just have one unique identifier that was already verified, and a simple or real case came into force during the pandemic when we were asking persons to apply for grants. Now, these people, they would each had to submit information on the ID and address and all those information to each different entity, be it NIB or Ministry of Social Development or Ministry of Labor. And in times of these, you needed something like unique identifier that was already verified. So the person would not have needed to submit all those information and be verified. In terms of timeliness, the approval and verification process would already be done.
Okay. So if you had to pick 3 things that you would do for the ICT system in the public service right now that would make a decisive difference, what would those 3 things be?
Okay. Firstly, I will start at a proper IT governance structure and framework. Lack of that, of course, will result in a lot of the things that we identified in the report. So we will start there in terms of strategic direction. Your IT department needs to align their goals and objectives to the entity strategic plan. So we have to start at that strategic level. We have to have proper IT governance in the public service. Secondly, there's a lot of policies and procedures in the public service in terms of ICT. We are lacking approved ICT policies, and I must commend some of the ministries and departments. They took the initiative to develop their own policies and adopt certain information security standards and international standards. And the third being, we have to look at the future. We have to look in terms of capacity. We have to look in terms of emerging technologies. Maybe not AI, don't think we are ready for that yet, or blockchain, but at least cloud computing. We need to be futuristic. We need to progress more in terms of IT than where we are now. And of course, I will add one more to that tree, BCP. We need
sorry?
BCP, business continuity planning.
Yes.
That is lacking throughout the ministries and departments. There are a number of entities they have developed draft plans, but of course, in terms of recent pandemic, these plans will need to be revised and updated to take into account biological disasters and such. So that is something that should be a priority.
Okay, I have two questions for you, based on what you said, actually. The first one is this. You said maybe not blockchain, but certainly cloud computing. And you said also maybe not AI. But aren't we at a point now where, I mean, yes, we may not have AI throughout the system or blockchain throughout the system, but as we understanding where the world is headed and pushed even further by COVID, where everybody is getting on a digital platform in order to simply function in the world, shouldn't we not only do the cloud computing and do the digitization, but look strategically at where AI and blockchain are very critical for the development of not just the public service, but the country, the economy, the services sector, etc. in the country? Don't you think that that would be a critical thing that we might do?
So let me rephrase what I meant. I meant, of course, we should look at AI and blockchain, but currently, where we sit and what's happening currently in public service, we need to address certain issues before we can even advance to that.
Basic, yeah, because we are so basic.
In order first, yeah. So we need to have our foundation solid before we, yeah. But we would love AI and blockchain in the public service. That is the future.
What difference would that make? Just tell me two things. What difference?
Efficiencies, enhance ease of doing business, information security. You will be more confident in terms of your processes and information being secured.
All right, I want to thank you very much. I want to ask my colleagues, because we're coming to the end of time, I want to give you an opportunity to ask at least one question each before we go. I don't know if you want to ask it to the Auditor General, to the Comptroller of Accounts, or if you want to continue to ask the Head of IT. Who would go first? You want to start again?
Yes, Chair, I have a question for the Auditor General.
Yes.
It has to do with when you turn to between pages 49 to 51 of the report, it shows you where there are some issues regarding payments. There was a late payment on the highway extension to Point Fortin, which incurred default interest charges for late payment. There's the issue of the NCC not having submitted any financial statements from 2015 to 2018, as well as the Commission for Self-Help, where there was some level of a fiasco in the past couple of years, not having submitted financial statements either for 2017 and 2018. So these three issues, the late payment on a debt to the highway loan to Point Fortin, the non-submission of financial statements for entities that spend millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of state funds, such as NCC and NC, and the Commission for Self-Help, Carnival Commission and the Self-Help Commission. What exactly are the sanctions that are available to the Auditor General so that this can be corrected, or that the persons so responsible can be brought to account to the taxpayer?
Thank you for the question. Again, I wanted to highlight that this was presented here, again, in accordance with our mandate. We do not have enforcement as part of our mandate. We are not an enforcement agency as part of their mandate. We are here as part of the overarching framework of accountability and presenting a sort of independent oversight of what is taking place. Now, I come back to my pet peeve, and the issue is these items that we have presented at paragraph 251 on to 254 comes under the context of current transfers and subsidies. As you can see from the chart, current transfers and subsidies for the current year, as has in previous years, range around 40 to 51% of government subventions. And therefore, it is behoovent upon the ministry and the accounting officer that is under whose remit these particular entities fall under, that they ensure the timeliness of payments, that they ensure that they are receiving information that would facilitate them in proper decision making, would facilitate them in assessing the performance of these entities, and also to put any mitigating risk factors into place so that they can address these factors. So we, as I started off saying, looked at these things because we believe now there is a state enterprises performance manual, which sort of directs how the ministries are supposed to address these entities that are under their remit. And of course, part of that is that they need to look at their performance and how they are performing. And that being said, the performance manuals requires the documents that we have set out here to be presented to the ministries. Not only are they to be presented to the ministries, but the ministries need to actually look at the documentation, assess the documentation, and call these entities to account. That is why you have them under their remit. Again, my pet peeve: monitoring, monitoring, monitoring. And by monitoring, we don't just mean looking, we mean taking action, being influenced by the information that you receive and taking specific decision-making action. So I hope that has answered your question to some degree.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator, do you have a question? MP Leons, do you have a question that you'd like to follow up on? I don't know if you want to do something with, well, I don't want to advise what you...
I don't have any question.
You are okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right, Senator?
I'm fine.
You okay?
Follow up.
All right. Let me just, we're going to close up now, but let me just ask a couple of questions having to do with where we have all of those funds, like the green funds, the unemployment funds, and the others. I just wanted to ask the Auditor General, do all of those funds, as far as you are aware, free? Are they encumbered in any way? Or, well, that's a simple question. Are those, all those funds, as far as you're aware, unencumbered and free?
Chair, what do you mean, in what context do you mean unencumbered and free?
I mean, for instance, there was a recent statement in which this suggestion was made that the Green Fund money could not be taken out of the Green Fund because it had been tied to the rise in the size of the exchequer account or the central bank overdraft. But I don't see anything related to that here. So I simply wanted to make sure that all of these funds were available and free to operate as they are supposed to.
Chair, each of these funds are directed by the particular statute that has established them and for the particular purposes for which they have been created. So therefore, legislatively, the Green Fund was created for a particular purpose. There were drawdowns this year, significant drawdowns this year, and they were used in accordance with that purpose. There are other funds that are restricted in nature, and they are described, the restrictions of those funds would be described so that again, and the restrictiveness of them are based on for the purpose in which the fund was created. So for a much more detailed analysis of restrictions, I believe that information should be sourced from the Controller of Accounts. Because that forms part of the cash management of the Ministry of Finance.
I will ask her a question then about the Green Fund, but let me continue to ask this. Carrie Fester, in the report on Carrie Fester, I think that report said that there were a lot of things to be concerned about. Would you like to comment on that at all? Have you since gotten information or documentation that would cause you to change your mind about what you have in the report? There were several expenditures that were undocumented, several expenditures that were in excess of what was originally planned in Carrie Fester, etc.
We have not finalized. We are still working on Carrie Fester, and that is still part of our program of works for 2019-2020. So that this is going to be a brought forward activity that is going to be assessed. When it's brought forward, we are hoping that the ministry would respond in some detail to our queries and address some of the concerns raised in the report, and we will take it from there.
Are you getting cooperation now in complying with your requests?
Thus far, we have been getting assistance from the ministry.
Okay. Now, I notice in the IFMIS that the Ministry of Finance is seeking to extend the time by which IFMIS is brought on stream by another year. And this thing has been ongoing for some time. Can you tell me what it is IFMIS will achieve, when it comes on stream, what that means in terms of government's monitoring of its finances, and what we are missing by not getting this done as expeditiously as possible?
As you know, Chair, the Integrated Financial Management System, by name, which is shortened analogy to IFMIS, is under the project is being implemented through the Ministry of Finance under the remit of the Controller of Accounts. So obviously, it is an effort to improve the efficiency of the finances of the government, the timeliness of the reporting, and also to ensure that there is standardization across the board. It will have obviously supposed to have some internal control features built into it. But in terms of what the actual project document and what it hopes to achieve, I don't know, through you, Chair, if you can ask Ms. Laban if she could add to what I have stated here.
Okay, I will go over to the Comptroller of Accounts now, and then I will close the meeting, because I have two quick questions, one related to IFMIS and the other one to the Green Fund. So I'll go over to the Comptroller of Accounts now, Ms. Laban. And the first question is the IFMIS question, which is that when we bring that on stream, what will we achieve? What will it do in enhancing government's capacity to manage its accounts And what are we missing by keeping this thing postponed and extended all the time and continuing as we are continuing without this thing being on stream?
Chair, now the IFMIS, it's a software that has a suite of application software that would integrate all of government's accounts. And when that is done, you would have the recording, monitoring, financial management of the accounts integrated, and that will assist in the government's carrying on their budgeting and financing activities on an online and real-time basis. So yes, we would be able to produce financial statements, reports for better decision-making by the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, and it would assist the whole of government.
Yes, and I mean, and simply put, let's say from the citizen's point of view, government will be able to know on any given day or at any given hour what its financial position is in terms of cash availability and expenditure executed, won't it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And that would add a significant capacity in government to be able to make serious decisions, no?
Yes.
On a very timely basis.
Yes, and just to add as to the status, the pilot is supposed to start in 2021 for the 4 pilot ministries in 2021 with full rollout in 2022 after the user accepted testing.
Okay, but this is postponed though. Wasn't this supposed to be before?
Yes, it was. But there were delays, COVID being part of it.
Yes, well, I understand that.
So they are going to ask for an extension of 1 year.
Okay, and on the Green Fund, I just want to make sure, this thing about the Green Fund being stymied, that is to say, we were unable to give any grants from the Green Fund because it was tied to central bank overdraft account being so highly overdrawn. Is that a fact?
Because all of these accounts are included in the central bank overdraft statement, yes, it would cause a restriction in those accounts if they are close to the overdraft limits.
Okay, so it's not because of any pledging of accounts. It's simply because these accounts are taken into account as the central bank overruns. As the central bank runs up the overdraft. Is that right?
Yes, yes, they are.
All right then. Thank you very much. I want to sincerely thank all members of the Comptroller of Accounts Department, including the Comptroller of Accounts herself, Ms. Laban. And I want to thank all members of the Auditor General's Department, including the Auditor General herself, Ms. Pujadas. And of course, I want to thank my old colleague parliamentarians from both houses who are on this committee for a very, very lively and engaging discussion this morning. I hope the public has enjoyed the questions that we've asked and the answers that have been given, and that they are more enlightened on the state of government business and the state of the accounts for 2019. So I want to thank all those stakeholders again who participated today, each and every one of you, and I want to mention your names, the Auditor General, Ms. Pujadas, the Deputy Auditor General, Ms. Ramdas, the Assistant Auditor General, Mr. Peters, the Audit Director, Ms. Dwarka Ali, the Comptroller of Accounts, Ms. Laban, the Deputy Controller of Accounts, Ms. Thomas Villalmosa, the Treasury Director, Ms. Brown, the Treasury Director, Ms. Bali, and the Director Economic Research and Planning, Ms. Collis. And I also want to thank the technical team from the Parliament and the Secretariat from Parliament for their support this morning in this task, which was done virtually rather than from a single room with all the participants present. I hope this did not cause any problems for the viewing audience on television, and I hope that you got all the information that was shared this morning. And again, I want to thank my own colleague, Senator Tahaka Obika, Vice Chairman of this committee, Senator
Prasad.
Senator C. Prasad, sorry. Sorry about that. I kept remembering Cherise and I could not remember your last name. And of course, Minister and MP Adrian Leons. Okay. Thank you all very, very much for a fruitful meeting. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have, and I hope the population or citizens are much more enlightened on this particular matter. Thank you very much. Good morning. That's it, right?
Are we doing it in camera? You want to do it in camera, the postmortem?
Yeah, could you do that?
Yeah.
Could you just hold for 1 minute?